I've been meaning to come to you with something for Black History Month all month. Now we're nearly at the end of it. So I am sorry I'm not getting as much time for video making as I'd like. So I'm still going to try and put things out once a week, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And it's always a good time to think about Black history. And I'm just getting into a historical novel phase, which I haven't had all year. So I feel like this is a great time for me to come with you with these books, regardless of the fact that we're celebrating Black History Month or not. But we are. So let's learn some stuff. I've got some books to recommend you, and there is tons of things that could be recommended. So what I'm bringing you to today is historical novels, not necessarily straight historical, but historical fantasy, historical SF, by Black authors. And there's just a wealth of amazing book featuring Black characters as well. There's just a wealth of amazing books. And I also want to tell you something very exciting. I personally find it very exciting in my local area. And that is, you may have heard of Olaudah Equiano. And Olaudah Equiano was the first Black author to publish in English. He was kidnapped in Africa and trafficked, and then he bought his way out, and then he campaigned against slavery and kidnapping, and he was very popular speaker at the time, and it's not hard to see why when you read his book. It's still in print. He's a witty writer. He's very erudite. He's very, but in an approachable way. Like he's a brilliant writer. I'd highly recommend it. Sure, it's old, but you're a reader, you'll be fine. And it's great writing. But he was also a bit of a local hero from where I live, a bit of a local hero to Cambridge. And the church where his daughter is buried, they've been looking, they knew her grave was in the graveyard somewhere, but they've been trying to work out exactly where. They've just found the graveyard, and they've also just managed to collect enough money to produce an Olaudah Equiano window. So that will be going up. And we can visit his daughter, and we can admire the window that's still in the process of soliciting artist submissions. So it will be a long time before that actually finishes, but it's the church nearest to the Olaudah Equiano Bridge. If you happen to know Cambridge at all, it's next to that. So I think that's very exciting. But that's not fiction, and I'm coming to you with fiction today. So yeah, I'll as ever pop the books I mentioned down below, including his, but I'm going to get in. So the first thing I want to mention is children's books. And the first thing I'm going to do is hold up an American Girl book. Now you might think, but Kirsten, you're not American. How do you know about this? Well, I'm not American, but I'm on the internet and I've got American friends. So this is Melody. She is from the 1960s. She's shy, but she's into music. Her brother's big into Motown. She's singing at the church. She's got all her family. Some of them are moving away from they're not moving away from the civil rights protests. They're moving towards the civil rights protests, but they're moving away from the boiling pot that was Alabama at the time. And we've got a lot of civil rights stuff going on. This is not the only American Girl featuring a Black character. And if you don't know about American Girl, let me tell you about American Girl. American Girl are a series of dolls and books, which they have a lot of like modern dolls that you can choose one and make it look like you, or like make it look like a doll. It's just a doll. And they have a line of once a year they bring out this doll that has a character, but it's a modern doll. But they also, where they started out, is historical characters who have a set of, it was originally 6 books and I think it's now 2 books, but they have a set of books telling their story, And this is Melody, and she is, as I say, 1960s Motown, civil rights, activism, excitement stuff going on. But there's also Addy, was one of the first dolls way back in the 80s, and she is again born into slavery rather than kidnapped herself, but she gets out and moves to the north. And then it's all about her freeing her family, or getting her family free, and sort of, why was the Civil War so important? Why is it so important to not kidnap people and not enslave them? Which it seems really obvious, but it also needs repeating over and over. And there is also a girl called Claudie, and I think, I'm not really sure when Claudie's story happens. And I haven't read Claudie's stories, but it's set in the 20s with the Harlem Renaissance, poetry, art, bakery, New York stuff going on. So I'm actually really excited to get to Claudie, and I will do eventually. But I just wanted to mention that these historical books, they're well researched, they're light, they're accessible for the sort of 8 to 12 market, and they might be worth a go. My least favourite, this is controversial, is the one who's a patriot at the time of the revolution, and it's never outright stated, but is clear is a slave owner, or rather her grandfather is a slave owner. And I feel like it's glossed over that on one hand we've got slaves are bad, and on the other hand we've got, but you can still be in this bad oppressive class and good. And I feel like that happens a lot when we talk about the American Revolution, or any white history of that time. And no, you can't. You can do better. You can do better. You should do better. You must do better. So that's, I just wanted to mention that, right? So you don't stumble into that unaware that that's Felicity. Other stories of other times don't have the same problem. Oh, of the ones that I've read. Wait, isn't that it? Okay, so that's the children's books I wanted to talk about. Now I'm going to move on to more speculative fiction. And the first book I want to mention is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. No, I don't. The first book I want to mention, moving on to more adult books and mostly more speculative. Actually, no, I'm going to... Moving on age-wise, I've got a YA. Actually, I'm not sure if it is YA. Oh, Lord. Not doing great here, am I? Okay, moving on to more adult books and maybe a bit more speculative. I'd like to talk to you about The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is a book about the time when theoretically we're desegregating, but actually they're finding excuses to put black boys in, I want to say prisons, but it's worse than prisons, just like institutions that are all about abuse and eventually murder, and just like squeezing every drop of everything out of these boys and then throwing them away. And this is obviously a thing that people did to other people, and to a certain extent still do. That's what capitalism works, I'm afraid. But it's also a horror, a ghost story, and it sort of feels like, you know, the real things that go on are always going to be the most horrific, but there's also an underlying sort of more traditional horror story, ghost story aspect to it, as well as bringing up these reformatories and the horrible, horrible things that were happening. I don't have a copy to hand to hold out, but it is. But I don't have a copy to hold up, so and it's about love and family and people banding together to overcome, and there is a certain amount of people getting their dues. But it is very heartbreaking, obviously, because of the subject matter. I've got something a little less less horror and into sci-fi, but still equally heart-wrenching, but ultimately hopeful, I think. And you can see, I'm putting it the wrong way, you can see I've got Sorrowland by River Solomon here. Solomon has written a lot of books which could fit in this video, and they're all wonderful books. But I chose Unkindness of Ghosts to talk about. This is sort of the antebellum South, but on a spaceship. And it's about stratification of society, but it's literal, like the levels in the spaceship as you go on up. There's a doctor who is, she's got a little bit more freedom of movement because of her need to get around to her patients. So she sees a lot and we see through her eyes. She also reads to me as autistic, which is quite important. You know, autistic people have always been here and we've always been doing our thing. And it's, you kind of, the structure of the book is very, you're climbing up and down through the levels as you climb up and down through the levels of the plot. And it's just, it's beautiful, it's heart-wrenching, it's everything you'd expect from what I just said with the female autistic protagonist in the antebellum South and blah blah blah. So yeah, definitely go and read it because it's amazing and I'm not doing it justice. But if you go and read, then yeah, then that's what I'm hoping, is that one of you will go and read one of these books. But if you only going to read one, this one, Unkindness of Ghosts. Okay, moving on to books I'm going to hold up physically. The Principle of Moments by Esmie Jikiemi-Pearson. This is a twin timeline epic sci-fi with a romance subplot with George III in which our protagonists cross time and space in order to... Bennett Aronovich said, "My favourite kind of grand space opera where anything can happen and usually does at great speed." This was the book which... it kind of felt like the epitome of what was going on in that year. And every time people tried to suggest a book to me at that time, I was like, Oh, is that the one with George IV? Well, this is the one with George IV. This is the one which just feels very zeitgeisty for 2024, but is actually about time travel and love and friendship, and just the fact that there's always been Black history has always been part of history. Like, and again, as white people, we often try and kind of shove Black history to one side, but I live in a country that's had Black people since 55 BC because that's when the Romans came. So they've always been here, and it's good to remember that. And I think that's one of the things this book does great. Okay, on to slightly more modern books now. You've probably seen me talking about this before. This is, again, it's civil rights era, but it's a completely alternate timeline. It's about lift engine inspectors, and it's about glass ceilings. So it's the first Black woman to ever become a lift inspector, and there are two alternate theories of lift maintenance, like in a building where it goes up and down, elevator maintenance. And so she's on one of them. There's a lot of like academia going on. There's a lot of the old boys club, and as I say, our protagonist, whose name I've forgotten, Lila Mae Watson, is the first Black woman doing this job. She's possibly also the first Black person and the first woman doing the job, although I'm not sure about those because it's a while since I read it. In a mostly white male world, she's the first Black woman doing it. And there's intrigue and shenanigans, and it's wonderful. And my last book is completely different. Because it's not speculative at all. The Colour Purple, it's an epistolary book spanning Americas and Africa about family and found family and racism and sexism. And again, it's such a classic, and I didn't ever pick it up for ages. So I just want to remind you, you probably know it's out there. I just wanted to remind you that it's still relevant to our life. And if you haven't read it, you maybe could consider that. And I'm just going to read a bit from the foreword to I'm just going to read you the foreword. Oh, and it's super queer as well, which I forgot to mention. I'm just going to read you from the foreword, which Alice Walker wrote on the coming of the film. This has been one of the most challenging realities for white supremacists to recognise, because it leads to the fact that there's always been hang on a minute, I'm gonna start again. Hang on a minute, I'll come find you in a minute. I'll come and find you in a minute. I'll come find you in a minute.
How long until you're done with paper class?
Just give me 2 minutes and I'll come and find you. So I'm just going to leave you. And the last book I'm going to talk about is completely different, and it's not speculative at all, but it's The Colour Purple, which is one of the major books about sexism and racism and queerness and wonderful, wonderful things. It's epistolary, it's got family, it's got family, it's got love, a lot of love. It's got innovation. It's wonderful. And I'm just going to, I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm just putting it here to remind you that it exists, and it's relevant to our world today, and it's worth going and reading it if you haven't read it. But also, I'm going to read from the foreword, because I sort of sat down to make this video and I was like, okay, look at the face. Am I the right person for this video? Well, maybe not, but I'm also not the right person to completely ignore it, given that I'm making videos anyway. Okay, so this is from Walker's foreword to the edition of the book which came out with the film. It is not overly stated in the book, but what one understands, or should, at least as an American, is that within the black population in the United States, many other colours, especially whites, browns and reds, are represented. This has been one of the most challenging realities for white supremacists to recognise, because it leads to the fact that many of their American ancestors sold their own children into slavery, and that they participated in starving, beating, or in many cases murdering them. I'm sure part of the problem many white racists had and still have with Barack Obama, our recent president, with his white American mother and black African father, is that he reminds them of what many of their enslaved relatives might have been like had they received a chance to develop as full human beings. So I'm just going to leave you with that, and I hope you go away and are enriched by these books, and I will see you soon. Bye.